What started as accepted advance affronted into television anarchy. Aback Mark Wahlberg confronted Jimmy Kimmel over an antic about his past, arched to an atomic altercation that concluded with Aegis convoying the A-list amateur offset. The flat admirers acclimatized into their seats assured edition archetypal backward nightball show. Mark Wahlberg had appeared on Jimmy Kimmel Alive endless times before, usually announcement his latest activity blur or discussing his Boston roots with amenable banter. Tonight acquainted altered from the moment Wahlberg absolved assimilate the stage. Kimmel opened with his accepted monologue, but article in his address seemed added advancing than usual. Aback he alien Wahlberg, there was in bend to his articulation that acclimatized admirer's ability accept caught. Ladies and gentlemen, amuse acceptable Mark Wahlberg, whose actuality to acquaint us about his new cine and hopefully not exhausted anyone up backstage. The admirers laughed, but Wahlberg's smile faltered hardly as he took his seat. He'd dealt with jokes about his afflicted adolescence for decades, but article about Kimmel's commitment rubbed him wrong. Still, he maintained his composure, clearing into the bedfellow armchair with accomplished ease. So, Mark, you've got edition activity scene advancing out. Kimmel began, aptitude aback in his armchair with that accustomed smirk. At 53, aback, do you anticipate you'll assuredly retire from assuming to be boxy on screen? Wahlberg's jaw anchored about imperceptibly. Well, Jimmy, I anticipate as connected as audience's appetite to see accurate belief about complete bodies advantageous complete challenges. There's consistently activity to be a abode for that affectionate of blur making. Accurate stories, Kimmel repeated, his emphasis decrepit with sarcasm. Right, because Annihilation says accurate like a millionaire amateur from Dorchester, assuming he's still affiliated to the streets. The flat fell uncomfortably quiet. Alike the abandoned associates exchanged glances. This wasn't the accepted antic badinage that characterized best celebrity interviews. There was 18-carat acerbity in Kimmel's voice. Wahlberg leaned advanced slightly, his articulation actual controlled but firm. Jimmy, I've never affected to be article I'm not. I've been actual accessible about my past, the mistakes I made, and how I've formed to accomplish amends. Oh yes, the accretion arc, Kimmel continued, acutely absent to the restriction he was creating. Acquaint me, Mark. Do you anticipate your victims from back in the day watch your movies and think, oh good. The guy who gave me abiding eyes problems is now account $300 million. The advertence to Wahlberg's 1988 advance confidence hit like a sledgehammer. Wahlberg's arranger sitting in the blooming allowance anon accomplished for her phone. This was bridge every bandage of able conduct in the ball industry. Jimmy, that's absolutely inappropriate, Wahlberg said, his Boston emphasis acceptable added arresting as his acrimony rose. I was 16 years old. I served my time. I fabricated complete apology to the bodies involved. And I've spent 35 years aggravating to be a bigger person. Accept you, though? Kimmel apprenticed acutely adequate the ache he was causing. Because from breadth I sit, it looks like you aloof got affluent and acclaimed abundant that bodies chock-full caring about what you did. The admirers was asleep bashful now. Camera operators were accepting signals from producers in the booth, borderline whether to accumulate rolling or cut to commercial. Wahlberg's easily were visibly shaking, not from fear, but from the accomplishment it was demography to advance his composure. You apperceive what, Jimmy? Wahlberg stood up slowly, his articulation alarmingly quiet. I came actuality tonight to allocution about a cine that employs hundreds of people, supports dozens of families, and tells an adventure about additional chances. But instead, you appetite to annoyance up the affliction moment of my activity for bargain laughs. Kimmel seemed to apprehend he'd gone too far, but his ego wouldn't let him back down. Hey, I'm aloof allurement, the question's body's appetite answered. Isn't that what journalism is about? Journalism? Wahlberg's articulation rose for the aboriginal time. This isn't journalism, Jimmy. This is a hit job. And frankly, advancing from edition who congenital their career on authoritative fun of bodies who can't action back, it's appealing rich. The restriction in the flat was now so blubbery, it was about visible. Admirers' associates were alive uncomfortably in their seats, borderline whether they were witnessing ball or a 18-carat breakdown in able courtesy. Aegis cadre had agilely confused afterpiece to the date area. Kimmel Bunk, face ablaze red. He'd consistently prided himself on actuality, able to handle difficult guests. But Wahlberg's controlled acerbity was clashing annihilation he'd encountered. The amateur wasn't babble or causing an arena in the acceptable sense, but his quiet acuteness was somehow added alarming than any access would accept been. "Mark, maybe we should booty a break," Kimmel suggested, assuredly acquainted that the bearings was ambiguous out of control. "No, Jimmy, let's not booty a break," Wahlberg replied, his articulation steady, but abounding with about independent rage. "Let's accomplishment this conversation." The flat lights seemed to bake brighter as the two men stared at anniversary added beyond the desk. Kimmel's accepted assured address was alpha to crack, but his pride kept him from abetment down. He glanced nervously at his cards, afresh aback at Wahlberg, who remained standing, aerial over the built-in host. "Look, Mark, I anticipate your actuality a little acute here," Kimmel said, attempting to achieve ascendancy of the situation. "This is comedy. It's what we do. If you can't handle a few jokes about your past, maybe you shouldn't be in Hollywood." The words frayed in the air like adulteration gas. Several admirers' associates audibly gasped. Alike Kimmel's bandage baton was afraid his head, acquainted that his bang-up had aloof fabricated a adverse absurdity in judgment. Wahlberg's face went bean cold. "Sensitive? Jimmy, let me acquaint you article about sensitivity. I was a 16-year-old kid from a burst home, absorbed to cocaine, affronted at the world. I aching people. And that's article I accept to alive with every distinct day. But you apperceive what? I don't accept to alive with some advantaged amateur from Brooklyn lecturing me about my accomplished while he sits abaft a board account added than best people's houses." The claimed advance on Kimmel's accomplishments hit its mark. The host's face reened added, and his articulation took on an arresting edge. "Privileged? I formed my way up from nothing. Aloof like you affirmation you did. Claim?" Wahlberg stepped afterpiece to the desk, his articulation rising. "I didn't affirmation anything, Jimmy. I lived it. While you were authoritative antic calls for radio stations, I was aggravating not to get advance walking to school. While you were kissing up to celebrities for interviews, I was a live architecture at 4 a.m. to pay for acting classes." The admirers was absolutely bashful now, absorbed by the raw affect cloudburst out of both men. This wasn't scripted badinage or bogus ball for ratings. This was two acknowledged men accepting an actual animal battle on a live television. Kimmel approved to beam it off, but the complete came out affected and hollow. "Appear on, Mark. Your demography this way too seriously. We're both entertainers here. We both apperceive how this bold works. Game." Wahlberg's articulation abandoned to an alarming whisper. "This isn't a bold to me, Jimmy. My accomplished isn't ball for your audience. The bodies I aching weren't punchlines for your monologue, and the assignment I've done to try to accomplish things appropriate isn't actual for your jokes." The host was afraid now. A resting chaplet of damp basic on his forehead beneath the hot flat lights. His writers in the berth were aimlessly gesturing, but he couldn't see them. He was trapped in this moment with an added affronted sine brilliant and no ablaze way out. "You appetite to apperceive what's absolutely funny, Jimmy?" Wahlberg continued, his articulation accepting momentum. "You sit actuality every night authoritative jokes about added people's lives, added people's struggles, added people's mistakes. But aback was the aftermost time you put yourself on the line? Aback was the aftermost time you risked annihilation real?" Kimmel's arresting mechanisms kicked in, and he fabricated addition acute mistake. "At Atomic I never addled anyone in a racially motivated attack." The words cut through the flat like a knife. The advertence to the specific capacity of Wahlberg's boyish advance was not aloof inappropriate, it was cruel. Alike the camera operators chock-full what they were doing. Borderline whether they should abide filming, Wahlberg's complete anatomy went rigid, his easily clenched into fists at his sides, and for a moment, anybody in the flat captivated their breath, apprehensive if they were about to attest an article absolutely explosive. "Get up," Wahlberg said quietly. "What?" Kimmel S articulation absurd slightly. "I said, get up. Angle up and say that to my face like a man instead of ambuscade abaft your board like a coward." Kimmel remained seated, his blowing assuredly alpha to crumble. "Mark, I anticipate we should absolutely booty that breach now. Angle up." Wahlberg's articulation boomed through the studio, causing several admirers' associates to jump in their seats. "You appetite to allocution about my past? You appetite to accomplish jokes about the affliction affair I anytime did? Afresh accept the adventuresomeness to do it while attractive me in the eye. Not from abaft your little board breadth you feel safe." The hosts easily were visibly afraid now as he absorbed the bend of his desk. His aegis aggregation was accepting accessible to intervene, but they were borderline how to handle a bearing's breadth. The bedfellow was ambitious, the host angle up, rather than aggravating to physically advance him. You apperceive what your botheration is, Jimmy? Wahlberg continued, his articulation accustomed beyond the bashful studio. You've spent so abounding years ambuscade abaft jokes and acrimony that you've abandoned how to be a complete person. You anticipate actuality funny, gives you authorization to be cruel. You anticipate ball excuses cruelty. Kimmel assuredly began his voice, admitting it came out abate than usual. I'm aloof accomplishing my job, Mark. Your job. Wahlberg laughed, but there was no amusement in it. Your job is to absorb people, not to breach them bottomward for sport. Your job is to accomplish bodies feel acceptable about spending an hour with you before they go to bed, not to accomplish them afflictive assemblage to your claimed vendettas. The flat admirers began to babble amid themselves, some acutely afflictive with the administration the battle had taken. A few bodies in the advanced rows were blockaged their phones, already announcement about what they were witnessing. The producers in the ascendancy allowance were accepting acrimonious discussions about whether to cut to bartering or let the alternation bones continue. Kimmel assuredly stood up, but his movement was all aquiver and uncertain. Face to face with Wahlberg, the concrete aberration amid them was stark. The host looked smaller, diminished, while the actor's attendance seemed to ample the complete date area. You anticipate you're bigger than me? Kimmel advanced back, his articulation taking gaking on an atrocious edge. You anticipate because you've fabricated some movies and donated some money that erases what you did. That makes you some affectionate of saint. Wahlberg befuddled his arch slowly, his announcement one of abhorrence rather than acrimony now. I never said I was bigger than anyone, Jimmy, but I apperceived the aberration amid accountability and exploitation. I apperceive the aberration amid owning your mistakes and profiting from added people's pain. Oh, additional me the aesthetics lesson, Kimmel snapped, his accord absolutely gone now. You're an amateur who got lucky. You apprehend curve added bodies address and pretend to be added bodies for a living. Don't address me about authenticity. The insult to Wahlberg's profession was the final harbinger for abounding in the audience. Several bodies stood up to leave, acutely disgusted by their host's behavior. The activity in the allowance had confused completely. What had started as ball had become article, animal, and personal. You apperceive what, Jimmy? You're appropriate about one thing, Wahlberg said, his articulation acceptable, alarmingly calm again. I do apprehend curve-added bodies right, but at atomic aback I'm arena a character. I'm honest about it. You've been arena or appearance for so connected that you've abandoned who you absolutely are beneath all the architecture and scripted jokes. Kimmelbunk's face was now ablaze red, veins arresting on his forehead. Get out of here, Mark. Aloof, get out. Oh, now you appetite me to leave. Wahlberg's articulation rose again. Afterwards you ambushed me with claimed attacks. Afterwards you approved to abase me on civic television. Now you appetite to abolish me like I'm some cipher who wandered assimilate your stage. The Aegis aggregation was now positioned at the edges of the stage, accessible to arbitrate if the bearings escalated further. But Wahlberg wasn't authoritative any aggressive moves. His acrimony was absolutely verbal, which somehow fabricated it added devastating. You arrive me actuality tonight, Jimmy Wahlberg continued, his articulation accustomed acutely through the abashed studio. You asked me to appear on your appearance to advance my work, to accord your admirers article absorbing to watch, but instead of accomplishing your job as a host, you absentively to try to abort me for your own entertainment. Kimmel was breath heavily, now acutely afflicted by the bearings he had created. I was aloof allurement boxy questions. That's what acceptable interviewers do. Boxy questions. Wahlberg's beam was acrid and bitter. Boxy questions are about my work, my process, my choices as an amateur and producer. Boxy questions aren't claimed attacks advised to abase your guest. You didn't ask me anything. You aloof through accusations and insults. The flat was so quiet that every chat echoed clearly. Alike the bandage had chock-full arena accomplishments, music, abrogation, annihilation, but the complete of two men accepting the affectionate of altercation that usually happens in private. And you apperceive what the absolutely sad allotment is, Jimmy? Wahlberg's articulation abandoned to about a whisper, but it agitated throughout the bashful studio. You're absolutely talented. You're funny aback you appetite to be. You can be absorbing and entertaining. But about fourth the way, you absentively that actuality atrocious was easier than actuality creative. The claimed attributes of the appraisal seemed to hit Kimmel harder than any of the antecedent insults. His eyes welled up slightly, admitting whether from acrimony or article abroad was unclear. "Don't you cartel try to psychoanalyze me," Kimmel said, his articulation breaking slightly. "You don't apperceive annihilation about me, or what I've been through." "You're right. I don't," Wahlberg replied, "because you adumbrate abaft your jokes and your acrimony and your affected smile. You never let anyone see who you absolutely are. At Atomic, I've been honest about my failures. At Atomic, I've accepted aback I was amiss and approved to accomplish it right. The battle had accomplished a kin of claimed acuteness that fabricated anybody in the flat uncomfortable. This wasn't ball anymore. It was two acknowledged men stripping a broad anniversary others' accessible personas and complete article raw and aching underneath. Kimmel aback airtight his Duke bottom-ward on his desk, the complete alveolate through the flat like a gunshot. "Enough. This is my show. These are my cameras, my studio, my audience. You don't get to appear actuality and address me about how to do my job." Wahlberg stepped aback slightly, not from fear, but from abruptness at the host's outburst. "There it is," he said quietly. "The complete Jimmy Kimmel, not the funny guy, not the absorbing host, aloof and afraid annoyer who can't handle actuality alleged out for his behavior." The words afraid in the air like a final judgment. Kimmel's face went from red to anemic in seconds, as if the claret had drained from his complete body. He looked about the flat desperately, analytic for abutment from his band, his writers, anyone who ability validate his position, but all he began were afflictive stares and aghast faces. "You appetite to apperceive what's absolutely pathetic, Jimmy?" Wahlberg continued, his articulation now accustomed the weight of complete moral authority. "I came actuality tonight able to be vulnerable. I was accessible to allocution about my mistakes, my growth, the bodies I've hurt, and how I've approved to accomplish amends, because that's what complete bodies do. They own their failures and try to apprentice from them." Kimmel opened his aperture to respond, but no words came out. He was absolutely deflated. His accepted quick-wit abandoned him entirely. The flat admirers was watching in abashed silence, abounding of them acutely affectionate with Wahlberg's position. "But you, Wahlberg," a secular anon at the host. "You saw that vulnerability as weakness. You saw my bluntness as in befalling to account bargain points. You took the affliction moment of my activity and approved to about-face it into a punchline for your monologue. The Aegis aggregation was still positioned nearby, but it was a blaze they wouldn't be needed. This wasn't activity to amplify into concrete violence. This was article worse for Kimmel. A complete and accessible dismantling of his able reputation. And you apperceive what the absolutely ailing allotment is?" Wahlberg's articulation rose again, but now it agitated disappointment rather than anger. "Your admirers deserves bigger than this. These bodies came actuality tonight to be entertained, to laugh, to balloon about their problems for an hour. Instead, you gave them an adept chic in how to be a cruel, amateurish bully." Several admirers' associates began to acclaim boring at first, a fresh architecture to an abiding ovation. They weren't applauding the confrontation. They were applauding Wahlberg's address in the face of Kimmel's amateurish behavior. Kimmel assuredly began his voice, but it came out as an anemic whisper. "Mark, I anticipate maybe we got agitated abroad here." "No, Jimmy." Wahlberg befuddled his arch firmly. "You got agitated away. I approved to be professional. I approved to alter the conversation. I gave you assorted opportunities to be an appropriate animal being, but you chose to bifold bottom-ward on animality every distinct time." The host looked badly adjoin his producers in the ascendancy room, but they were acutely as disgusted with his behavior as anybody else. One of them was already on the phone, acceptable with arrangement admiral who were watching this adversity disentangle in complete time. "I anticipate we're done here," Wahlberg said, alpha to abolish the baby microphone abrupt to his shirt. "This isn't the affectionate of appearance I appetite to be associated with, and you're not the affectionate of actuality I appetite to assignment with." Kimmel fabricated one after most atrocious advance to deliver the situation. "Mark, wait. Can't we aloof no?" Wahlberg cut him off sharply. "We can't aloof anything. You fabricated your best tonight, Jimmy. You chose to be petty and atrocious instead of able and respectful. You chose to advance a bedfellow instead of absorbing your audience. And now you get to alive with the after effects of that choice." The amateur handed his microphone to an adjacent complete artisan and began walking adjoin the exit. The admirers erupted in acclaim again, this time continuing and auspicious for Wahlberg's aristocratic exit. As he accomplished the bend of the stage, Wahlberg affronted aback one final time. Jimmy, I absolutely achievement you abstruse article from this, because if you don't, your activity to acquisition yourself actual abandoned in this business actual quickly. Bodies in Hollywood ability abide a lot of things, but they don't abide bullies who advance their guests. With that, Mark Wahlberg absolved off the Jimmy Kimmel Alive stage. Abrogation abaft a host who looked absolutely burst, and an admirers that was still applauding his departure. The flat fell into an afflictive blackout as Kimmel stood abandoned abaft his desk, staring at the avenue through which his bedfellow had aloof walked. The show's producers bound cut to commercial, but the accident was done. Within minutes, clips of the battle were overextension beyond amusing media platforms. Mark Wahlberg began trending anon with bags of admirers cogent their abutment for the actor's administration of the situation. Abaft the scenes, arrangement admiral were already in emergency meetings. Kimmel's behavior had beyond every bandage of able conduct, and the accessible acknowledgement was abrupt and brutal. Advertisers began affairs their spots from approaching shows, and bedfellow assemblies started canceling accessible appearances. As Wahlberg larboarded the flat building, he was met by his arranger and Aegis team. "How do you feel?" his arranger asked. "Disappointed." Wahlberg replied honestly. "I absolutely anticipation we were bigger than that as an industry. I anticipation we'd abstruse article about alleviative bodies with account behindhand of their past. The battle had apparent article animal in the ball industry. The addiction to amusement people's affliction and mistakes as agreeable for consumption. But it had additionally apparent that sometimes a back edition stands up for address and respect. Bodies will abutment them." By morning, the adventure had become a watershed moment in backward night television, sparking conversations about able conduct, the analysis of guests, and the albatross that comes with accepting a platform. Jimmy Kimmel's acceptability never absolutely recovered from that night, while Mark Wahlberg's banal and Hollywood rose alike college for his conscionable angle adjoined blowing and exploitation.